thank you for coming out tonight. We at the Save Acworth History Foundation really, really appreciate this. So, welcome to the next speaker series. Tonight, we're going to have a lot of fun sharing stories about the best known drug dealers from Acworth. So, just a quick question. Who in here has actually worked at one of the pharmacies? I know, okay. Of course, y'all. And me, I only worked for 2 weeks at Acworth. Anyway, just a couple of quick introductions. Becca Keenel here is president of Save Acworth History Foundation. Betsy Brown here.
Bill Hamilton.
Where's Bill? Oh, there he is. Bill Hamilton over there. And of course, Louis Bramlett and Andrew Bramlett here. We got a few that couldn't make it tonight, but we got a...
Alan Kim.
Yeah, I'm on the board too. So we have a good time. In fact, the fun thing is you learn some of the things you thought were true. They're a little different over the years. Things change, and then you hear more and more. And so we'll do that tonight. We'll start learning some of that stuff. This thing is designed to go 1 hour. I have a feeling we're going to have a lot of stories. So it may go longer if it does. If anybody needs to leave at 8, feel free. Nobody will be offended. Just help yourself. So let's see. With that, I want to start with some bios, because these guys have not only are they accomplished and have done so much for Acworth from the pharmacy standpoint, but they've actually done a lot more. It's pretty amazing, frankly. So, and with that, I want to start with Larry Braden, because he is so disappointed he couldn't be here tonight. He had a medical appointment that he couldn't reschedule, and he got excited about it. He even invited us all out to dinner ahead of time, and he was very excited. And he probably has as many stories as anybody to share. But anyway, Larry's bio, he was born in Brunswick, Georgia. His family lived in Savannah. He went to Young Harris College, where he was taught political science and American history by Zell Miller, who would become Georgia's governor, who then became a personal mentor to Larry for the rest of his life. So they're pretty close. Larry originally wanted to join the Navy and become a pilot, but he had a skiing accident when he was a teenager, and that ended that. So then he turned to pharmacy. He was an alderman on the city council. He chaired the Planning and Zoning Committee until 1988, when he left and was replaced by Ben. And he was active at the Acworth Methodist Church and JC's. He was also executive vice president of the State of Georgia Pharmacy Association. Quite accomplished. Carlos Dyer is from Cartersville, Georgia. He was classmates and best friends with Governor Joe Frank Harris. His first pharmacy job, he had a desire to go to Florida. So he went to Orlando. His first job was on the Orange Blossom Trail in Orlando. And then one Friday, he gets a call from George Lacey saying, would you be interested in coming back to Acworth? And only been there a month, his dream to go to Florida. He was working at Lacey's Monday morning. So we're glad we won that one. He graduated in the Southern College of Pharmacy. In 1964, he left Lacey Drugs to join Willie B. Count. Of course, I'm going to try to say his name instead of Dad. Oh, anyway, so he left to join Willie B. to purchase Acworth Pharmacy. And in 1980, in the 1980s, Governor Joe Frank Harris appointed Carlos to the Georgia Board of Pharmacy, which he said were the best years of his life in pharmacy. So that's very cool. Ben here was born here, grew up on Fowler Street, moved to Northside Drive and then to Dallas Street. Ben married his North Cobb High School sweetheart Sylvia in 1976. And his first exposure to pharmacy was at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I'll let Ben tell that story real quick now. So that's a fun story.
Well, what happened was that I had a bellyache and couldn't get it stopped. My mom decided to call Dr. Cobble, and so Dr. Cobble came over and diagnosed me with whatever. I don't know what the diagnosis was, but anyway, he said, Beulah, where's your telephone? And so he went over to the telephone, picked it up, and started talking to somebody on the phone, and he says, I want you to give Benny Flanagan Paregoric and 2 ounces of it and the directions and such. And he said, and while you're out, since you're already out, you're going to be at the drugstore, he said, why don't you just take it over to their house? And so that person that he was talking to was Larry, right? And so it impressed me to the point that, first of all, that the doctor would come to the house to make a house call. But secondly, that Larry went to the pharmacy, filled the prescription, brought it to the house, made sure that my mother knew how to give it to me, and it just made an impression. So, and since that day, I have to say, Larry's been a mentor to me, and so you don't realize what little things can make an impression on people. So even though I was only like 14 years old, 12, 13, 14 years old, it made a tremendous impression, and the impression is still there. So
that's awesome. I love that story. In 2017, Ben was recognized as the Cobb Chamber of Commerce Lifetime Achievement Award. That's quite an impressive award, I'm telling you. He's currently chairman of the Acworth Planning and Zoning Board, where he served for 35 years.
Tommy Halligood says 67 years. Because he just keeps adding it up. And adding it up. But he has no idea.
Tommy can do that. Also, the city presented Ben with a proclamation for his devotion and dedication to the Acworth community. It's funny, I talk about the oldest business in Acworth is Lacey Drug Company, which was originally Durham Brothers Drugs. Now it's going on 130 continuous years, so it's the longest continuous business in Acworth. And Ben is the longest continuous pharmacist in Acworth, I think. And of course, not least is my brother, Perry. He started Acworth Pharmacy at the age of 12. He was elected president of the Cobb County Pharmaceutical Association at the young age of 28. He got his doctorate specializing in drug interaction for geriatrics. He too married his North Cobb High School sweetheart, Vicki Stevens. Following retail pharmacy, Perry became an in-house consultant for Ethica Healthcare, who owns over 50 nursing homes in Georgia. He then got his license as a nursing home director. He's the executive director, or just retired from being executive director of the Georgia Medical Directors Association, which is the organization of all doctors and nurse practitioners of the 375 nursing homes in Georgia. He was head of that organization for about 20 years. He's past president of the Acworth Business Association. He's former chairman of the Acworth Downtown Development Authority. Years ago, he got together with a couple other families, and they founded North Cobb Christian School. He's co-founder of Lakeside Executive Suites, and now, currently, now that he's retired, he's executive director of Acworth Cultural Arts. And we're pleased to announce they're going to start construction on the theater this month, the end of this month. It'll be in the Roberts School right back here. They're already having plays there because they have the stage, but they're going to actually create a theater in the other half of the building. So that's pretty exciting. So with that, now we'll get to the fun stuff. I'll give you some background on some of these. Let's see. Sorry, this clicker is either too sensitive or not. There we go. The first pharmaceutical tax was written in 2100 BC on clay tablets by the Mesopotamians.
I think Carl was
where you did.
Oh boy, that didn't take long. Well, I always laugh about, I say, well, in the 1800s, drugs and elixirs were sold in the traveling circus by what they called snake oil salesmen. There was no controls at all. But what evolved in 1852, the American Pharmaceutical Association started. In 1906, the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, came around. In the 1950s, large-scale manufacturing of drugs and the introduction of prescription-only drugs changed the role of pharmacists to compounding, dispensing, and labeling. By the 1970s, pharmacists had evolved toward a more patient-oriented practice and developed the concept of clinical pharmacy. And, there we go. In 2000, pharmacists were named the most trusted profession in America. So I think that's pretty cool. Came a long way from snake oil salesman.
And we fought the nurses, whether we.
I was gonna say.
Interesting little fact, more people see pharmacists than see doctors, nurses, or any other profession, as they're easily accessible every day and have a vital role in the health of every community. So did you know there have been 6 pharmacies on Main Street? There's actually been 8. We were talking about it. There were 2 more, but they weren't community pharmacies. They were dedicated to geriatric nursing homes. More
Institution.
yeah. One pharmacist came to Acworth after he faced armed robbery in Atlanta twice. A horse was ridden into a soda fountain on Main Street. A pharmacy safe was blown up by excessive dynamite that was timed precisely to coincide with the passing of a train. One pharmacy was instrumental in a Georgia Drugs and Narcotics Agency drug bust on South Main Street. We're going to tell all those stories. That was kind of the teaser. There's some fun stories we're going to talk about. Now, to give you a background, the first drugstore in Acworth was in 1895. It was Durham Brothers Drugs, and it was located right next door to where Fusco's used to be until 2 weeks ago. It's been pampered in pink. We call it pampered in pink. Now it's something, I don't know the name of it now. But anyway, that's where it's located, right beside. And that was Durham Brothers Drugs until 1943 when George Lacey came to town and renamed it Lacey Drug Company. So the original Lacey was also at that same location before they moved to where they are now. Do not have a picture of Albert Johnson, A.J. Durham. He's the one that opened it in 1895. 2 years later, his brother graduated from pharmacy school and bought in 50%, and C.G. Durham, and the 2 of them ran the drugstore. And I thought it was kind of interesting. This is the house where C.G. Durham lived. You might recognize this house. It's right across the street from Acworth Presbyterian Church, right there at the caddy corner of Lakewood Drive. Beautiful home today and beautiful home back then. Here's, in the early 1900s, pharmacies fulfilled the role of apothecary, formulating and dispensing drugs. These formularies or reference books, they would have the condition on each page, and then you'd have all the condition, remedies, treatments, dosages, and everything. And this was donated to Save Acworth History by Ray Dalrymple. And it was interesting that back then, some of the drugs that were dispensed were morphine, cocaine, opium. The world has changed. These are just a few quick, there was an advertisement on the left. There was a Durham Brothers radio at the top, and then below that is a Band-Aid from the 1920s. I think over 100 years it hadn't changed that much with the Band-Aid. And on the right side is an article in the paper that said Durham Brothers is believed to be the oldest drugstore in Cobb County. The next one to come to town was Acworth Pharmacy. Dr. James came here in 1939, and he opened up Acworth Pharmacy, and this was located between Scoops and where the fountain used to be. It's where the woodworking shop is, the bar and the pubs and the woodworking shop. That's where the original Acworth Pharmacy was, and this picture is from that location. We'll get to the stories in a minute. I'm just giving the background. This is Dr. James. Some called him Dr. James. They called him S. That's his actual diploma from 1910. And this is Dr. James at his original store in downtown Atlanta on North Highland Avenue. He was robbed right here in this building at gunpoint. And the police caught the robber, sent him to prison. He got out of prison a few years later, came back and robbed him again. Same guy. Caught him again. And Dr. James said, I'm out of here. I need a safer city. I think Acworth sounds like a pretty good place to come, and he was right.
He's right.
And this is a photograph of the original soda fountain at that location, on the first location of Acworth Pharmacy. There would be 3 locations. That was the first one. And oops. Not going backwards. There we go. Sorry about that. All right, that upper left picture is a picture of Dr. James holding his granddaughter. A lot of you know Vicki Rusk and her sister Judy. That's their grandkids. And then the picture below right is Willie B. Kemp in the left corner, Dr. James in the middle, and to the right, the shorter lady to the right is Leona McClure, who worked there and became his second wife. And then William Marchman is to the right. I'm not sure who the other one is.
That was left Marchman. Y'all called him William, but I think we called him left.
Okay. Here is a narcotics and poison registry from Acworth Pharmacy. On the right, where the pharmacist signed off, where Dr. James, Willie B., and Carlos signed off. The interesting thing about this is while they were purchasing these poisons, it was mostly, what was it? Yeah, strychnine. But if and if you read it, it's kill crows, kill fox, kill rats, kill fox, everything. Perry swears that there was a line that said kill spouts, but I don't believe
Yeah. Kills husbands.
Got the unwritten line.
Yeah. This is the second location for Acworth Pharmacy. Just moved it up the street north. Just to the left of there is Alley Good Alley. Everybody knows where this is. This is probably the one that most people recognize when you think of Acworth Pharmacy back in the 60s and 70s. And what happened was Dr. James wanted to hire Dad away from Lacey Drug Company. Dad, Willie B., worked for Lacey Drug Company for 4 years. And Dr. James wanted to hire him away, and he said he didn't think it was cool for him to reach out directly, so he did it through a third party, asking him if he'd be interested. Dr. Lacey was not happy about this, and so he left. And so Dad went to work for Dr. James. And then eventually, Dr. James, who's kind of reaching retirement, he wanted Dad to buy into the store. And Dad, this was in 1964. And he said, there's no way I can buy in. I don't have any money. Just bought a new house, a new car, and I have 2 young boys. And Dr. James said, don't worry about it. I'll make it so you can. He said, tell you what, I'll give you a raise, and you give me that money for the raise to pay. That doesn't happen anymore. So Dad worshiped Dr. James. Anyway, and then Dad contacts Carlos. I'm not sure what year that was. Or it was almost the same time.
That worked for Dr. Lacey too.
Yeah, Carlos worked for Dr. Lacey.
Everybody worked for Dr. Lacey.
So then when Dad was buying the store, he calls Carlos, and they became partners and owned Acworth Pharmacy.
And then Carlos married into the family.
Yeah. Yeah. A few years later, Carlos marries Dad's niece. So then when Perry graduates from pharmacy school, he can't get a job because there's already Dad and Willie B. Kemp and Carlos Starr are the 2 pharmacists. So there was no room for him. Same thing happened to Ben. When Ben graduated from college, he couldn't get a job because you had Larry Braden and Ray Dalrymple already there. So both Perry and Ben go to Marietta and work for Atherton's, I think. Is that right? I figured they're going to be here to correct all this stuff.
Which pharmacy do you work at?
Atherton's.
Atherton Drugs.
After the drugs, different times.
Yeah. Yeah, we weren't there at the same time.
And here's a picture of the soda fountain that most people remember in the second location of Acworth Pharmacy. This is before it got moved downstairs. And then there's a picture of Willie B. Kemp and Betty Sulis and some employees at that location. One interesting thing is on Sundays, the store hours were
9 to 11, 1:30 to 6.
9 to 11 and 1:30 to 6. So people could go to church and have dinner at home with their families. You don't see that anymore. And then also there's a couple of interesting stories. Perry, you tell about the robbery.
Oh, yeah. Dad called Mom. We were just little kids
We
on
were
bicycles.
like 10 and 12 years old.
Yeah. Dad says, send the boys up to the store. So we took off on our bicycles from Collins Avenue, And I went up there, and Dad said, I want to show you something. And there was this huge, one of those old safes, about that big, turned on its back with the door peeled off of it. And he said that obviously professionals came in and put some plastic explosive or dynamite type stuff on the door and waited for the train to come by.
They used too much. It putty
And
dynamite
they used too
around the door.
much, blew the safe out of the hole under the cabinet, and all the pills came down all over.
When we walked in that place, there were millions of pills just all over the pharmacy. It just blew everything everywhere.
And later that day, somebody brought the bank bag.
Well, that was the next day because they took off after. Well, I guess it was same day.
Yeah, the same day or next day. They found the bank bag on the shore of Lake Acworth, and it was wet, and there were checks in it.
Remember those old canvas bank bags? They were real big. I think there were 3 of them.
And the checks were left, so Mom hung them up on the clothesline and dried them out, and then called people that they weren't negotiable, and every one of them came back and replaced them. And some people even came back and said, I paid you cash, here it is again. Great, you know,
Yeah.
cool stuff.
It was just everything was honesty back then. And
What a beautiful
but
time.
where they found the bags is interesting. After the thieves blew open the safe and took the canvas bags, thinking they were going to get money, and it didn't. When they got to they were leaving north of town on Main Street, and then when they got to the bridge over the lakes, they threw them over into Lake Allatoona. And the next day, somebody was swimming in that location and stepped on the bags, pulled it up, and it said Acworth Pharmacy, and they brought it back to the drugstore. And that's when Mom had them all spread out through the living room. It was amazing.
You ever find out who done it?
No. Another fun story was when, a few years later, Lacey's had already closed the soda fountain. And the reason being is it took up too much space and didn't bring in enough revenue. So all drugstores were closing soda fountains back then, even though it was a social gathering place. And so Acworth Pharmacy was going to close their soda fountain, and the city said no.
Why did Dr. Lacey want to close the fountain?
Oh, because he said nobody's going to pay 25 cents for ice cream.
About $25.
Yeah, no kidding. But so the city.
Then we tried to close, and the customers said not a chance.
Because it was the only place left. It was the last soda fountain in Acworth. It was a meeting place, and everybody, it was just comfortable there.
So I think Carlos came up with the idea to take the soda fountain and put it downstairs in the basement where people could get to it from the back of the building or go down the steps. And so we had it down there for a while. Vicki said she came to visit you one time. I don't remember.
My favorite story is the day Dad told Perry and I that they're going to close the soda fountain. He said, invite 6 or 8 of your friends, all you boys, and go down there, whatever you want. Had those big brown canisters of ice cream and canned glass jars of cherries and walnuts and whipped cream and chocolate. And we were sick as a dog that afternoon. But we were heroes at school for like half a day. Period. Yeah, sort of sickle cell.
Well, I'm telling you, Alan, we had a patient that lived directly behind the store, and she had sickle cell disease. I don't know if you know, that's terrible. In the black community, primarily, the red blood cells will sickle, and it's very painful because trying to go through the capillaries and everything. And this young teenage girl had to have pain medicine, and it didn't matter whether it was Medicaid covered or whatever. Same thing happened at Lacey. I never saw a situation where we turned somebody away from the medicine. They got the medicine no matter what. But we had all sorts of cool deals. We would have people that weren't very, shall we say, financially reliable, and they would want to charge something, so we'd say, okay, well, we didn't want to give a full charge account, so would they could have a ticket, so they could, they'd have a ticket, and then if they paid off that ticket, then we let them have another ticket for whatever they wanted the next month or so, and the money ran out. But if people didn't have the money, they got the drugs one way or the other, just gave it to them.
Well, I thought it was pretty special that that girl was in such pain, and there's no way they could afford the pain medicine. And Willie B. and Carlos said, we're going to give it to her anyway. They'll probably go to jail today if they did that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a little ancillary story to that. We had the same type system. We had people that had the regular charge accounts, and they could charge whatever they wanted to, and they'd pay it off most of the time. But we had the little tickets that we also did. And one of the things that when Walmart came, we noticed that some of the people would come in and they would pay their ticket, and we'd never see them again. So what we did is that we let them pay on the ticket, but we never let it be paid off 100% because they would always come back. And so that was a way of retaining our customers, because they would always know that they owed us money. And the poorer people in Acworth, which was the majority, came to the realization that we were doing them a favor by letting them run a tab and keep that tab with something owed on it. And so, once a lot of times people would go, would come in the store and they would pay off their ticket, like I said, and they'd go to Walmart because they thought Walmart was cheaper, but most of the time they came back too.
You have to run that ticket.
Yeah.
Now we know why you're still in business today. Shrewd, smart businessman. One thing I always enjoy the fact is, you think of, for, I don't know, 30, 40 years, it was Lacey Drug Company and Acworth Pharmacy. And you say, well, they're competitors, which they were, but they all rode together every month to the Cobb County pharmaceutical meetings. They exchanged customer information, which would probably be illegal today, as far as who were the good payees and not. So both of them, if somebody didn't pay at one, the other one would find out. And this was pretty interesting that I found out, is that if you go to one to fill a prescription and they're out of that prescription, instead of them saying, come back in 2 days, they would call the other one. And they would send a runner down Center Street and go pick up the drug, take it, and then that drugstore owed the other drugstore the drug. So that was really pretty cool. And also it speaks volumes about taking care of citizens. That's really the big thing, which is, I think, special.
And we might add along to that we would not give copies of prescriptions to each other, because we would have Dr. Lacey and Dr. James figured out that people would try to price match or price shop and everything, and you'd spend all of your time on the phone transferring prescriptions. So they stopped it, and that way, you were either an Acworth Pharmacy patient and customer, or you were a Lacey patient and customer. So that was one of the things that they did. And you were talking about the runners. That was one of my jobs when I first started with Lacey's.
Me too.
Yeah. Sometimes with me.
Yeah, we call and say, you coming up here with this? Why you bring this?
Yeah, bring this. But the biggest obstacle I had when I was doing the running between the stores, especially when we were on the main street there next to where Eaton's was, is that I had to run around, and you probably did too, run around the big baskets of Easter eggs that Hubert Allen had in front of Allen's. Because there would be kids there standing there watching and looking at the Easter eggs, salivating and wanting to know how they could get them out of that basket. And you just had to almost stop and get out in the street to go around them. So, and then you'd also have to go around Hubert too, because Hubert would stand out there to keep the kids away from the Easter eggs and the toys and such that they had out there, so.
My first job, I was 12, and I worked on Sunday afternoons from 1:30 to 6 at the soda fountain. Go home and my arm would be killing. But I got paid 50 cents an hour. So 4.5 hours is $2.25. And then I discovered that he took Social Security out of it. So that cost me 8 cents. But that left me enough to buy a model car at Allen's. So I would go up and buy a car and put it together and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, every 2 weeks or so, that's all the money I had. Finally, I wised up as if you save your money, you can buy a real car. So I did that.
Here's an advertisement on the left, Acworth Pharmacy. This was, they had a marketing, campaign where they would give every mom of a newborn a silver spoon. And I thought that was pretty smart marketing to try to get them to start coming into the drugstore. And then, I think the interesting thing on that advertisement is it says the daytime phone number is 126, the nighttime phone number is 100. The one on the right is where Acworth Pharmacy and Lacey Drug Companies were the first two to work with the JCs on flying the American flag for something, I'm not sure what it was.
Every holiday.
For every holiday. So on the left is Carlos, and in the center is Ray Dalrymple, and to the right with JC's is Phil Roebuck. Let's see. This was at the third location, was behind Regions Bank, and this is what it looked like when Dad and Carlos and Richard Mintz built the building in 1975. Beautiful yellow roof.
That's probably called that baby poop yellow.
Over time, it changed to a green roof, and today now that building is Lakeside Executive Suites. Here's a couple of pictures. The upper left was the prescription department in that location. A lot of people remember there was a step up to the prescription department. I had some friends, Vicki Rusk in particular, said, "Your dad terrified me because he'd walk out there and I'm just a little kid and he looked like he was 8 feet tall, and just because I don't know why y'all raised, Carlos, do you know why y'all raised the floor?"
So you could look out over the store.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Yeah. Of course, to the right is Willoughby filling prescriptions. This is what they did every day. Lower left is the back where the soda fountain entrance from the back side. And then to the right are the table and chairs that a lot of people remember. They used to be at that soda fountain. Okay, now Lacey Drug Company. Unfortunately, for obvious reasons, I don't have as many pictures from Lacey as I have from Acworth Pharmacy. But there's George Lacey walking down Main Street.
You've got Gober on there?
Was that his
That
nickname?
that was the name that he had when he lived in Fairmount. And I don't know if you all have been to Fairmount or over the years or not, but there were Lacey carpet mills. And Fairmount is up 411 toward Tennessee. And so the Lacey carpet mills, so the Lacey family was actually from that area. But when he came to Acworth, he became known as George. So we would have people come into the old pharmacy, the one next to Eaton's or Fusco's, as you want to call it, and they would walk in the front door and they would say, "Where is Gober?" And we knew that those were people that knew him from Fairmount instead of people that knew him from Acworth. So it was sometimes quite a show on Saturdays when there would be a multitude of people that came down from Fairmount to go to Marietta or just come to Acworth to see Gober Lacey.
Or to do a liquor run.
Yep. There was some of that too.
Here is a picture of the interior of the original location of Lacey's.
I have to tell you that I don't believe those are the scales that were in Lacey's, because Lacey's was not, it didn't say character readings.
Character readings.
It just said birthday readings.
So you're definitely a Rexall drug store.
Yeah,
There's Rexall back
we
there.
are. But the one that we have, we still have the original scales, weight scales.
I've got the weight scales from Acworth Pharmacy, and it's not that one. either.
Okay, I don't know where those.
Somebody told me that was Lacey, so we're gonna go with
It
it.
is Lacey's. I just think they switched the scales on them.
They may have. They may have.
Bottom right, some of you might know Hugh Hora, that was a pharmacist back with George Lacey.
Remember.
And now's the time to say that Becky Hamilton worked for both Lacey's and Acworth Pharmacy. And she wound up pretty much running Lacey's long-term care pharmacy as a consultant pharmacist, and we couldn't make her sit up here. So we're trying to think of ways to embarrass her.
Not to embarrass her, but she actually, it was bonanza when she got here, because the best thing that ever happened to her coming back for it, she met the most desirable bachelor around.
Who was that? And then she married you.
I know he does.
Yeah, she couldn't have him, so she married.
I was at Acworth from 1989 to 91, I think.
Uh-huh.
Was
Dad had his first female pharmacist before you. And he was kind of wary of having a woman pharmacist work here. And she stole the value. And, I mean, she got caught big time.
Get Librium.
Librium?
Yeah.
God, they didn't call it drug. Anyway, yeah, but she got arrested, and then you came along and redeemed womanhood today. Because he loved you.
I love him too. He, so I was in Blue Ridge. I had gone home. I'd left Nathan Pharmacy and moved home to Blue Ridge. And I had a maid there, but I was working at Revco. And oh, what a job, you know, chasing the Dempsey dumpster outside, dumping trash and things. But the good thing about that was my great aunt and uncle would bring me lunch every day. It was always a homemade meat and three that had Ethel made, you know, so it was kind of hard for me to leave. But Larry had come up there to a pharmacy meeting and he said, "You have got to come back to Acworth. You belong in the city, you don't need to be in the city." So sure enough, that's how I got to work with Libby.
Very cool.
It was cool. It was great.
A couple of stories about Lacey drugs, and Ben's going to know a lot more, but it was also a bus stop. It was a bus station. We got a bus stop for a while. There is a story about a horse that was ridden into Lacey Drug soda fountain. It was Ernest Gray. It was a bet. They bet him. Somebody bet him the horse. Said, if you ride this into the soda fountain at Lacey's, I'll give you the horse. So he did it. Rode the horse in. And his dad immediately took the horse away for a month. And Ernest said, well, it didn't matter because I couldn't have ridden the horse anyway after my dad whooped me. I couldn't have sat on a horse for a month anyway. But that was the horse story. Also, the Acworth Ghost Tour. There is a story that happened right in front of Lacey Drug on Main Street. Jim Saltarella is the tour guide for the Ghost Tours of Acworth. And the story goes, there was a guy, his name was Warren Bailey. He worked at the train depot. And don't know the details of why this happened, but there was a couple sitting in a convertible in front of Lacey's. And Beatty goes over with a gun to shoot and kill. It was his best friend. I'm thinking, okay, there's a triangle here. But anyway, but instead of shooting his best friend, he kills the girl. I think sounded like it was by accident. And then he turned the gun and killed himself. And so that's one of the stories on the Ghost Tour. Any other, Jim Saltarella's one that told me that.
Did you know that Durham, one time you could pull up front, honk your horn, and they come out, take your order and bring it out and put it in the window of the tray?
For the varsity.
Huh?
Just like-
Just like a varsity. Pull up and you honk your horn, and the girl will come out there and take your order. They come back, put your Coca-Cola or milkshake, whatever it was, on the tray. That was real early.
Boy, wouldn't it be nice to go get a milkshake? Just pull up in the car, get a milkshake. That'd be great. Okay, whoops. All right. Clicker. There we go. All right, so there's Larry. In 1968, Larry and Ray Dalrymple purchased Durham Brothers Drugs, or Lacey, actually purchased Lacey Drugs from George Lacey. And so there's a picture of Larry in the early years and Ray a little more recently.
Ray was planning on being here this evening, but he called this morning and canceled. But Ray would have been able to tell some stories too.
Yeah, between Larry and Ray, it's
Could have gotten out of control with both of them.
Well,
that's true.
Especially if they told all the stories they knew about the JCs at that time.
Okay. Well, Ben started at Lacey in 1966 as a stock boy, and that was the year he got his driver's license.
Yep.
So he could start running for the company. And then, like I mentioned earlier, they couldn't hire him when he got his pharmacy license, so he went to work for Atherton's and came back to Lacey's in 1974. And then the pictures below are very recent, where Save Acworth History Foundation had a plaque dedication ceremony for Lacey Drug Company and all they meant to the city of Acworth. And you can see Becky to the far right there. So that was pretty cool. And this was when they first moved, I guess, somewhere in that era. But you remember what it used to look like, or a lot of people in here remember what it used to look like, with the Ivy shop next door, and then you had Battles grocery store, and then of course Eaton's down there. And Lacey Drugs, before Lacey's in that location, was a clothing store. And there was also the post office was in that shopping center.
The original entry was on the Lemon Street side.
Okay.
And that was H&T Supermarket was the front there. And they had two doors, one in, one out. And they had contests and stuff like that. Tommy and Ray Harrison would have going on. And I remember that my sister Joan, who most of you know, and one of the contests they had was you collect the grocery store receipts, and whoever collected the most grocery store receipts would win a go-kart. Well, we were up there and we were bound and determined to get that go-kart. But it turns out that one of the boys that was one of the bag boys for H&T Supermarket went through garbage cans every night. collected all of the receipts that nobody wanted to take home with them. And when we were up there on a Saturday night when Tommy and Ray had the employees counting up the receipts and everything, and you know they were thick. And the bag boy won by about $100, I think it was, something like that. And so on Monday after that, I happened to go to the grocery store, and Tommy Harrison said, "Come over here. I want to talk to you." So he said, "We realize that the other person cheated, and so while he's getting the go-kart, we're getting a second one for you and John." And so, you know, he wanted to make it right, and he did. And
I didn't know that. How long would you let me have the go-kart?
So who got to drive? You or Joan?
we took turns, but the problem was too with the clutch on the thing. We were everybody knew where we lived. We lived in the curve before
Yeah.
the school down there. You get down to the bottom of the hill and you couldn't, it wouldn't have enough power to go up the hill. So I was on it, and Joan said, "It's my turn to ride." And I said, "Not until you push me back up the hill." Well, the poor things, you know, it had mufflers exposed and everything. She put her hand on that muffler, and I suspect to this day she still has the little holes that were in the palm of her hand. But that's one of the sad parts about it. But it was fun. It was fun.
And of course, everybody knows this. What we saw today. One thing, it's really cool that Lacey has stood the test of time when all the others, like Acworth Pharmacy, after Perry sold it to Revco, and then Revco closed it immediately. The big chains came in, but Lacey has done such a good job, not only as a pharmacy, but as a medical equipment company for home equipment, everything. And of course, now you guys have, like, I guess, 3 primary locations and a 4th being the office, I guess. So that's a success story right there. Okay, and there were 3 more drugstores on the south side of town across from JD's Barbecue. The first one was Altoona Drugs in 1975, and that was owned by Acworth Pharmacy. Willie B decided that the city's growing, it's big enough, so maybe there's an opportunity for that. But what was interesting about that is there is a story. Right next door to Altoona Drugs was Dr. Jim T. Harrison. And what was happening, Alex Coleman was a pharmacist at Altoona Drugs, so Dad and Alex would run it most of the time. And all of a sudden they noticed a skyrocketing number of narcotic prescriptions. And they said, something's not right. So Dad was really good friends with the head of the Drug and Narcotics Agency of Georgia and turned him in and said, something's not right here. And well, he was, the doctor was writing prescriptions for cash. And there would be a line of people at the store with cash in their hand to get a narcotic prescription. And so after he turned them in, 6 months go by and nothing happens. And then finally, one day, sure enough, there were 6 DEA agents standing in line with the cash, and as soon as they handed the 6 prescriptions, they cuffed them. They cuffed them. And then they go next door to the pharmacy, and they were going to arrest Alex Coleman and Dad. And Dad said, excuse the language, he said, you can go to hell. He said, I turned this in 6 months ago and you didn't do anything for 6 months. He said, I suggest you go call your boss. And that was the end of it. Nothing ever happened.
Or Dad and the boss were classmates, and Bill Chisholm was the chief.
That figures.
But they knew the Dad was okay, but it was a bad situation because we all had that, where people would come in and go, is this legitimate? Is it really something? You don't want to withhold stuff for people that are hurting. Some of it was uppers, like amphetamine, but you turn away more than you feel. And you just try to use your judgment. And we called them in and said, help us out here. And then we needed busted Dr. Jim. And boy, he was a character. But
There are a lot of stories about Jim Harrison.
Yeah.
Jesus, now I got to show my driver's license to get Sudafed at places. Anyway, also, what was it, Fred Mathis? Fred Mathis opened Mathis Drugs in that location to the right. That's the standalone building to the right. He opened Mathis Drugs in 1980. He also owned a drugstore on Bells Ferry Road. Was the very first drugstore in Cobb County to be 24 hours. So he opened up Mathis Drugs, and 5 years later he called Perry and asked him if he wanted to buy it. So Perry buys Mathis Drugs and renames it Main Street Pharmacy.
And spent the first month scraping nicotine off the inside of all the glass. everybody there's chain smoke. Customers too. And they had cigarettes everywhere. And so I went in there and we totally disinfected the place. And I got the tobacco products out of the store and said I refuse to sell cigarettes. And you guys said, you're an idiot. Because back then, every drugstore had cigarettes.
They were profitable.
And everybody smoked.
And everybody smoked. And I said, well, Ron Tucker and I decided we weren't going to sell cigarettes when we worked for Acworth. And then had to buy them up front because we wouldn't ring them up. And so I did that to Mathis. I did it at Acworth Pharmacy and took a hit. But everybody else started doing it then. And now CVS doesn't sell cigarettes, but Walgreens does. But anyway, it was one of those things. But oh, it was terrible in there. And that's where we opened up the long-term care pharmacy in the back and all that.
Oh, that's right. Once period had Main Street Pharmacy, then it opened up the long care pharmacy, and then Larry calls Perry. Wait, we got to get this right. A lot of people don't know this, but Larry bought Acworth Pharmacy. Dad actually worked for Larry
For 10 years.
for 10 years, and nobody knew that. So Lacey Drug owned both Acworth Pharmacy and Lacey Drug Company.
That was when Carlos had left, right?
Yeah, I wasn't
Yeah.
there.
He decided to sell insurance for a while. And then Dad, did that deal, and they just didn't talk about it because, kept up the good competition.
And then around 1990, Larry called Perry and said, "You want to buy Acworth Pharmacy?" And Perry goes, "Yeah." And so when he did, he took Main Street Pharmacy with the long-term care drugs and rolled it into the back of Acworth Pharmacy. Didn't you work there then?
Yeah, now that you said that, I was there from 87, I guess, to 90, right before
Yeah,
you bought it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was 1990, so he rolled Main Street back into Acworth Pharmacy, and then 5 years later, he sold it to Revco Drugs. And
they only had to because Bell South and Lockheed went into a contract with Revco and excluded us from selling prescriptions. We both had that. Our patients left us in tears. They had to go to Revco. And that's illegal now. But, it was kind of funny. All of a sudden, I realized my dad was my employee. And that was interesting. Because Dad worked until he was 70. And then after he retired, he became the drug delivery person for Elder Care Pharmacy in Acworth. And he and Mom would deliver drugs at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning all over Georgia to nursing homes.
Perry used to have to run drugs too in the evening, and one time when he was coming through Kennesaw,
Now, that was Marietta. I
Marietta,
was putting the system into Hillhaven next to the hospital. And when you do that, you got all these drugs that you're pre-packing, and then you find out the patients go home, and then you got to go back, and at the very last moment before midnight, you had to make sure all the carts were just right, and you would come back with these drugs that were never technically filled. So I'm coming back in my big van, and I pull off at a liquor store right there in Elizabeth because the drugs were falling over. They were on the seats in buckets. And so I stopped in order to straighten them out. About that time, a cop police officer comes around that corner, and he pulls up behind me, and he walks up and says, "What are you doing here in the middle of the night at the liquor store?" And I said, "Well, I had to stop. My drugs were falling over." And he said, "Do what?" And I explained it to him, and he just shook his head, didn't even ask for my ID. He said, "Go on."
That's what Main Street looked like for the temporary period. Crossing JD's. That's the one that had the smoke windows that he had to spend a week cleaning. And that's it for the pictures. Any questions for these guys, or any more stories? Anything that y'all recall? Because I know everybody's been in there from time to time. Probably has your own stories.
I would like very much for Carlos to share an anecdote with us of his experience dealing drugs here in Acworth.
Dealing drugs.
Yeah, I always please share just some anecdote or some story that you want to let us know.
Favorite story from either Acworth Pharmacy or when you worked for Dr. Lacey.
Well, the scariest I'd ever been probably one night I had a call. Well, when we got a call, I always call the police to tell them I was going to the pharmacy. So they had meet us there, and because we didn't know who was calling. People, most of them were people we didn't know, you know, and they'd call on drugs. So we just called the police. But one morning I got up and went to work, and I pushed on the door, and the door was unlocked. It wasn't locked. So I called the police, of course. We went in and nothing was gone, nothing was touched. I'd obviously forgotten to lock the door that night.
Oh, hey, we all do that. I was home one day, and the police called and said, the store's closed, you lock your door? I said, yeah, I'm pretty sure I did. He said, I'm standing in your pharmacy. Oops.
It paid to know people back then, though.
Yeah.
Well, in that this week, Dr. Rosenberger sitting right there, he wrote a prescription for Xanax, for Zantac for a patient, a young guy, Zantac 150 milligram. And by the time the kid got to Main Street Pharmacy, he had changed it to Xanax, like drawing an X through the Z.
Oh.
And changed it to 150 to 0.15, whatever it was. And I called it, and you know, they don't pay me to be a police officer, but they always wanted us to do that. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, what am I gonna do here? So I told the guy that I only had half of them, that I didn't have enough, but there was some coming in the next morning, and he could come back and get the rest of them. Druggies are dumb people. And so I called David, somebody, he was a police officer, and he was the one that stopped both Vicky and Hallie for speeding down Lakewood on the same afternoon. But that's another story. That's another story. But anyway, I called David to stake out the place, and he stood out of the way, and in trots the guy at 10 o'clock. And so he gets in there, and David walks out, and the guy fights him. And so they get into a big scuffle, and because this was a little bitty pharmacy and the door opened outward, they fell out the door fighting. And he lost his radio, and I called and said something about Officer down Main Street Pharmacy. And before anybody could get there, this guy jumped into his truck and tried to back over David. Oh. And David took 2 shots through that truck.
Wow.
And turned around, the guy took off, but he only lived a block behind the pharmacy. So they just went over there and arrested him, but it's all Dr. Rosenberger's fault.
I'd like for Ben to share 2 stories. One about when we were robbed when Kim Guthrie was there, and the other one about the deer.
Okay. Yeah, the only time that Lacey's has ever been held up, it was a rainy day. Shirley Wills was at the front.
How long ago was this? Just
Oh,
general
what,
80s, 90s,
maybe,
2000?
no, it was probably, yeah, 2000. 2000 was about right.
Okay.
So we've never been held up by armed robbery or anything, but it was a rainy day, and this guy comes around the corner, and he comes in the door, and Shirley Wills is at the front, and puts the gun in her ribs. And he says, take me to the back. So she walks him to the back. Ken Guthrie and Merrill Cook were the pharmacists there at that time. Shirley says, Ken, this man wants to speak to you. And so Ken walks over, and the guy does the same thing to him, and says, I want Dilaudid 4 milligrams. Well, Dilaudid's a brand name, but hydromorphone is the generic name. So Ken goes to the narcotic cabinet, and there's about 3 bottles in there. But Ken picks up 1 bottle and brings it and gives it to the guy. The guy turns around, starts walking out the door. Shirley Wells starts following him. And he gets to the front door, and he turns around and points the gun at her and says, "You better stop." So he goes around the corner of the building, and Shirley's after him. She follows him all the way to the corner of the building, and somebody, I don't remember who it was, went out and stopped her because she was going after him.
Wow.
And turns out that he had parked all the way down at the end of the street in front of what we know as the Nichols house. And he got in the car, and this was before there were cameras all over the place and everything. But he got away. But here's the thing. Merrill was on the other side of the pharmacy, on the telephone, and didn't know anything that happened until the police came. Because she was so engrossed in the patient that she was talking to on the phone that she didn't even realize that there was a holdup going on. And what was the other?
The deer.
Oh, yeah, one Saturday, I wasn't there either, but a deer came to the front door and butted his head and came into the pharmacy. And Merrill and Shirley were both there, and they kept trying to shoo him out. and he ended up in a little office cubicle that we had back there, and they did all that they could to get him out of there. And finally, they encircled him, and he came out the little cubicle office, and went out the door and went across the railroad track.
I bet he was glad to get out of there.
I bet so, but somebody said that they thought it was old and spent.
Any other questions, stories, anything?
Can I say something?
Sure.
Well, if y'all ever went to Acworth Pharmacy, you probably saw my mama, Betty Sulis. She worked there for probably 30 years.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, I'm Beverly, I'm her daughter. I saw her picture up there, so that's kind of cool. When I see my mom immortalized for something that she
Yeah.
loved working with Carlos would be. She really did. So when I went in our closet, I saved her jacket that she wore to work. She went to Revco, and of course when Revco, the Acworth Pharmacy, she went to work for Revco. And I found her name tag. And I got the jacket in my car, but I also looked in the pocket of her jacket. She clocked in for work Thursday, March 27th at 8:54 a.m. and she died the next day, March 28th. So she worked literally till the day before she died. And everybody knew Mama. Her visitation at the funeral home was supposed to be a couple of hours. It lasted. We went right after church. We didn't leave till 9 that night, and the lights actually went off in the funeral home. And we said, "Okay, Mama's saying y'all go home." so we closed up and went home. But she
We knew both your parents.
Yeah, my daddy had
Everybody knew your family.
Steve's Lakeshore Drive, uptown, had there, and everybody knew.
Oh, they weren't just employees, they were friends.
Mom loved it. They were. She loved
Yeah,
it.
they loved her too, and
Okay.
And
everybody
she made the
did.
best banana splits and lemon sours ever.
Yeah, and she worked with Louise Ruff. Remember Louise?
Yes, and Cindy.
Louise would take her lunch hour and run up to the funeral home if there was a body up there. She would go sign the book, and we'd say, "Louise, do you even know this person?" "No, but I'm going to go up and sign the book."
That's,
And then she visited every family.
all those women, Ethelville, Moselle,
Moselle
Miss,
Brand. Moselle Brand.
somebody else, a really pretty lady, I can't remember her name. Cox, Miss Cox.
Yvonne Brown,
Yeah.
yeah.
So there's, she loved it, that was her home, away from home, like I say, she worked at the
Marie
hospital.
Cox.
Well, with that, thank you very much. It's a little after 8. We really appreciate you coming out tonight. Anybody wants to stick around and talk, we'll stick around for a while.
Have some refreshments.
Refreshments over there. Oh, by the way, say Acworth History Foundation, everything you see tonight came out of what's going to be a book about a century of Acworth pharmacies and pharmacists. And the book is probably going to be published pretty soon. A booklet, a pamphlet, but it's pretty sizable. And So keep an eye out for that. I would imagine we'll probably sell them for a nominal fee to help raise money for Save Acworth History. But just want to let you know it's coming, so keep an eye out.
And one
Well, I
final,
just had one, let me get in front of you. I had a similar experience that you had, Ben, with a bellyache. And, do you remember a doctor who was here for a short while, Jay Bullard?
Oh, yes.
oh gosh,
Roger Willard.
Right, yeah.
oh,
So,
we could tell stories about Bullard all day long.
I loved it. He was quite a character, but my, parents took me up to his office. Now, I didn't get a home visit, but he would, meet you at his office. And a similar thing, he said, well, she needs this, and this, and we'll get it for you, right now. So the pharmacist that brought me my medicine was, wouldn't be Kim.
Yeah, Alan slammed his
Who
finger.
had gotten up in the middle of the night
Yeah.
to go
Okay,
get it.
we did that all the time.
Yeah.
The only thing that really bugged him one time was he got called up at 5 o'clock in the morning. The guy wanted to meet him at the pharmacy, and come to find out that the guy's wife had a baby, and he wanted to buy the cigars.
I can tell you one better than that. You remember the person that lived behind Acworth Pharmacy?
Uh-huh.
She was probably 60 years old. I got a call on Sunday morning at 6:30. And this person told me that she had a dire emergency and would I meet her at the pharmacy? And I said, well, sure I will. And so got up there and I said, Annabelle, what's the emergency? Where's your prescription? She said, oh, it ain't nothing like that. She said, I just need pomade because we're having a reunion at church today.
Pomade for
Pomade. And I just bit my tongue and we got the pomade for her. And I said, Annabelle, don't you ever call me to come up here and get you something like pomade.
Alan, I shared this with you, and I know that Harry knows it, but when Ben and I were first married, we used to double date with your mom and dad, and we would go down to Pepe's.
Pepe's on
Yes,
Ponce de Leon.
Ponce de
yes,
Leon.
Ponce de
Massive
Leon.
amounts of Mexican food.
We would go to lots of different restaurants, but that was our favorite, and they were the most fun couple to go out with.
That's for sure.
I remember that, and then we used to go down there with the Sewells a lot too.
Yeah.
Emery Sewell and Opal loved to go to Pepe's. And then with the Bullards, we used to go to the pizza place down off Roswell Road.
Russo's.
Yeah, Russo's.
And
Russo's.
only pizza place on.
And
Wow.
we had a volunteer fire department. And when the fire siren would go off, everybody would run to the fire department up here to see where the fire was and kind of follow the fire truck, because that was a good entertainment. And we would be over at the Bullard house, and we'd be playing bridge, and Roger had a big old Jeep with a red bubble on the top of it. He'd gotten special permission from the state because I may have to rush to Kennestone Hospital with a patient. Just total BS. And when that thing would go off and we'd be over there, we'd all pile into that Jeep and turn that red light on and take off and try to find the fire truck. And one time we couldn't find the fire truck. Took off down South Main Street. We must have had 12 cars behind us. We had no idea where we were going. But that was typical Roger Bullard.
He got drafted into Vietnam.
Yeah, and he wound up being an anesthesiologist in Augusta and invented a really good medical device for anesthesia and made a ton of money off of
He
it.
became anesthesiologist at Walter Reed.
Walter Reed.
And he was an Acworth boy?
Nope.
No.
They just moved up here. But I just wanted to say one final thing is, my little brother worked 2 Sundays at the soda fountain.
Yeah.
And said, I'm out of here. There ain't no way I'm ever gonna work in a drugstore again. And he didn't.
But you already told them why. It's because I got my paycheck and it wasn't what I had calculated. They took out this stuff called Social Security and FICA, and I thought, I don't want to be a pharmacist. They take advantage of you.
Exactly. And for this person to come and do the research that he's done on these pharmacies is unreal. I don't know what got into him, but he jumped onto history and he jumped onto this, and he's done some really cool stuff.
Well,
We've tried to straighten him out.
Yeah, well, you can have him. I kept him off the closure watch
That's
board.
it. That's a long project. No, when I first came back to Acworth, because I left for a long time, and I came back and I was up in the building, and I thought it'd be nice to kind of document Dad and Perry, kind of to honor, and Carlos. I mean, they're family. My dad, my brother, my cousin, and then when I started the research, I went, no, this is bigger. This is bigger than just Acworth Pharmacy. And then it turned into everything. And it was it's a blast. It was a lot of fun.
Ellen, as you're
Thank you
closing,
so
I want to take a minute. You gentlemen have been leaders of the community. You cared for all of us and tended to our medical needs. I just want to say thank you for what you've done for us for all of my life since I was 3 years old. And it's been, you're an asset to the community. And thank you very much for doing what you do.
All right. Thanks a lot.